Can
Thank
you
you,
hear me,
Mr.
Carla?
Chairman.
You're muted.
I'm muted.
You're still muted.
Hmm.
Carla, I think the room probably needs to turn on the audio down there.
Yeah,
Okay.
we can't hear you.
I'll come down and fix that. You're live.
Still don't. Okay. So does anybody over there know why we can't hear Carla?
Carla, can you hear us now?
No, we're not hearing her.
Oh.
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me? I'll be
Mr.
right
Chair-
down.
Mr. Chairman, can you hear me?
Okay, try it again, Carla.
Mr. Chairman, I believe Carla is on her way to that room, but can you hear me?
We can hear somebody. Say yes.
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't think so.
We started. Get you with that.
You start at 9:30. Okay. Now it's technical difficulties.
So,
Something
John, you
Yeah.
and Brian will present this to management council, right?
Yes, we will. We'll.
Basically,
What?
you just present all of it,
I think so.
because there isn't that many.
Yeah, there's not that much. We can tie some of it together.
Yeah.
Whether we get the Ag Authority bill passed, then it'll go on second, third reading today. Does it look like we're live yet, or, oh, Anthony's here? Of course we're not.
Mr. Chairman, you are live on YouTube now.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll call our joint interim committee to order, and we're going to discuss, what's that? Now you can't hear me. It's on. Can you hear me now? Okay, I'll just stay real close. We'll call this meeting to order, and it's the House Senate Ag Committee. We're going to work on interim topics together and iron out what we have. We'll start with some of the ideas. I'm going to start with John Winter brought one. I don't know whether to go down the list. Why don't we just go down the list? Okay. RJ, Senator Cost, you go ahead and talk a little bit about your idea here.
Well, real quickly, it's on trespassing, and we've had some bills that have tried to go before and we weren't successful on them. I think there's the question of we get tangled up between municipalities and our open fields and our open areas where our ranches are. And so I'm just wondering if there's some way we can somehow tie that together to where if we have to make two separate bills, fine, but can we get our ranches protected so the trespassing is effective on them? This is what I'm worried about. So that's kind of where I'm standing.
Committee, any discussion? Does it sound, well, I think I'm just going to do a straw poll. Everybody in favor of submitting this to the management council, say aye. Opposed? All right. Thank you, RJ. Um, Representative Winter. Well, start with the wild horse trespass. It's on this list.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This topic was brought to my attention by the Wyoming stock growers, Jim McGagna in particular. And I thought it was a great idea. And hopefully you can feel the same way about it. This particular topic is certainly a private property rights concern, and it's well-founded. On the Red Desert where most of the horses are at, there's a lot of country that's on the checkerboard, and every other section is deeded. And as a result, the horses that are out there don't know the boundaries, of course, and they are continually increasing in numbers. And it goes much further than just Wyoming. I think it's something we need to bring the attention to the general public about. The states of Nevada and Utah are also in dire condition, their range condition anyway. And so I would certainly hope that we could incorporate this topic into the interim session here that's coming up. If Mr. McGagna would like to chime in on this, well, I'd certainly be willing to listen.
Yeah, Mr. McGagno, would you like to? Yeah, and and I'd have a question too. There have been groups that have brought forward the idea of having them declared as a invasive species. And I'm wondering what kind of success they had with that. Apparently none, because the horses are still.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
multiplying.
Jim McGagn with Wyoming Stockgrowers Association. And what we're looking at is that if you look at Wyoming statutes today, there's one sentence in there that acknowledges that wild horses exist, and that our other laws that apply to livestock don't apply to the federal horses. But to trying to get something in statute, so when we have these horses trespassing on private land, on state trust lands, and the federal law says you notify the agency, in Wyoming it's BLM, and they remove them. Well, you notify the agency and they don't remove them, or it takes them years to remove them, and they're way over population levels. And see if we can put something in statute that would not claim the horses or anything, but would lay out a process how the state engages when these horses are out there and overwhelming us. I just happened to, this week, the Nevada legislature has in front of them a very extensive joint resolution on wild horses that they're working on. But I hope maybe we can go beyond just a joint resolution and come up with some statutory language that says, here's the steps we're going to take as a state agency. And I might just mention, Mr. Chairman, I see that you have a representative online from the Game and Fish, and I believe they're prepared to offer some comments on this as well.
Okay,
With that, I'd take any questions.
all right. If Game and Fish would like to comment. Oh, while you're coming on, we've got some discussion of the committee. Yes.
Yes,
Representative Ward.
Mr. Chairman. How about this one, Mr. Chairman?
Much better.
The question I had is, we're talking about wild horse trespass. What about feral horses? Do we want to try to address that as well? Make a distinction between the feral horses and wild horses that have federal protection? I mean, is that something, Mr. McGagna, that you think we should also be looking at, is kind of making them separate those two? Because I understand that there's a lot of question how many of these horses that are actually out there qualify as a wildlife or as a wild horse as opposed to feral horse.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, I think that there's value in looking at that. I do think we've got a little more in statute that applies now to feral horse. If they're trespassing, you do have some remedies. but it has become an increasing problem, particularly as these horse processing facilities have basically been outlawed in the country. And as a result, people that have older horses that they need to get rid of have gotten in the habit of just taking them out on the public land or somewhere and turning them loose. And that's, I think, what you're referencing, Representative Wharf. And so I think that that necessarily needs to be a part of the discussion, but as you've pointed out, needs to be addressed separately from how we would address the federal wild horses.
Yes, Representative Heiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. McGagna, we've talked about wild horses a lot over the past number of years and how they compete with livestock grazing, and they destroy or hurt watering facilities in the desert. What about elk? You know, they're also competing, but we don't hear a lot of discussion about how they are hurting the grazing in this area. Is that something we need to address? Is how many elk are in the area that they're competing with our livestock?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Heiner, two things I would offer. First of all, there are some areas in the state where we have some issues with excess elk populations. Generally, we're able to work with Game and Fish on those issues. Sometimes the problem is because we have a large landowner who won't allow any hunting on their land, and that complicates the problem. But two things. One, of course, the elk tend to be in the higher country, not necessarily the same country as the horses, though there's overlap like in the northern red desert. But the horses do far more resource damage because they concentrate around the watering holes and that, unlike the elk. And then just the nature of a horse, it's not a cloven hoofed animal and does more resource damage. So I think it's a separate issue, and one that I don't see a need, speaking from our organization, for legislative engagement at this point in time. But it's something that we're constantly working on with the Game and Fish Commission and department to try and address in those areas where it's excessive. Certainly it can be.
Okay. Senator Wasserberger had an idea that maybe we'd charge rent. I think we could do that at least on the state land.
Per day.
Yeah, per day. Is the Game and Fish there? Or,
Hello, Mr. Chairman, committee members, good morning. Can you hear me okay?
yes,
Great. Sorry about that too. I have a glare coming in my window, so I hope you can see me as well. But my name is Angie Bruce, and Deputy Director with the Wyoming Game and Fish. And this morning I'll be brief, but I did want to share our support for this item as an interim study item. We have talked with Mr. McGagna with Stock Growers, and do feel this is an important item to bring up. We have been concerned with the wildlife impacts created by overpopulation of horse management in Wyoming for some time now. And even though we can't quantify the specific impacts, we do know that wild horses at these high densities damage natural habitats and also reduce that nutritional quality for many wildlife species. I think it is important to note that the department has gone on record in asking the BLM to take necessary steps to manage these wild horses to their objective levels that are outlined in their NEPA plans, and to do so as soon as possible. So in closing, I just want to finish by saying that we would be glad to provide more testimony in the future, provide more details, and also talk about our past efforts on this topic. So with that, I'll stand for questions. Thank you.
questions, committee? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
just for the committee's information, I'm add one more thing. Perhaps you're already having an influence. Just day before yesterday, the BLM announced they're seeking comments on a plan to gather 3,500 wild horses in southwestern Wyoming. So,
okay. Yes, well, it's a problem, and Game and Fish hasn't declared them a trophy animal yet, so that may be an option too. I don't know. I'm gonna get in trouble. So straw poll again, committee, are we good with this one? Aye. Oh, okay. We'll add that to our interim topics. The next topic is predator management. And Jim, you should have stayed up here. I'm gonna let you present this. You're as knowledgeable as anybody on the next thing on the list was predator management. And you brought it forward. And we,
Well, thank you again, Mr. Chairman, and Amy Hendrickson, Wyman Wilbur has also brought this forward. I know she wasn't able to be on today and we've visited about it extensively, but there are a couple of things here. Right now we're in several areas of Wyoming, several counties in somewhat of a crisis on predator management. Although the BLM has acknowledged that private parties that are authorized by the state and local predator boards can do predator control work on public lands, including aircraft, using aircraft and gunners on those aircraft. Here about 4 months ago now, to everyone's surprise, we received a letter signed by law enforcement officials from the BLM, the Fish and Wildlife Service, and the USDA APHIS Wildlife Services, who does most of the control work in the state, or a lot of it, telling these predator boards that they were in violation of law and subject to some huge fines because they were using other than wildlife services to do the predator control work. And we're still in those discussions. We have not resolved that issue yet. But one of the things that brought to light is that the Wyoming Department of Agriculture, and I know Director Miyamoto is on here too as well, but they oversee from the state's perspective the animal damage program. For the most part, that has involved, I would say, two things. One, there's money that the legislature has provided, and they're in charge of distributing that money out to the local boards. And then they are also in charge of having the local county boards report their activities to them, and Department of Agriculture pulls that together and submits it annually to Wildlife Services. But what we're looking at here is, because of this crisis we still have now, that perhaps there's a way we could create somewhat of a more structured role within the Department of Agriculture for the predator control program. Not more dollars. The state's been very generous dollars, but more of a structured program that would put them more in charge and strengthen their position when dealing with all of these federal agencies that become engaged in the predator management issue. And so that, in the summary form, is kind of, it was driven by this current crisis on BLM land, but it's a broader issue of, can we create a more structured approach to how the state plays a more significant role in directing the program.
okay, questions? Representative Wharf?
Yeah, Mr. McGagnon, can you tell me, I know that the predator board's been going on for quite some time. What would your assessment be as to why all of a sudden this has become a conflict? Because this has been going on ever since we created it. And it used to be seen as, I thought it was seen as additive, that they were working in close, I guess, coordination with APHIS. And now all of a sudden I'm hearing that APHIS is now kind of fighting with our local predator boards, and rather than seeing us as being additive, it seems like that's changed. Can you tell us kind of what, in your opinion, caused that?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Wharf, I think there are a couple of factors. One is that the federal dollars that are available to APHIS have declined over time. And in fact, I believe more than 50% of the dollars that's being used by APHIS Wildlife Services in Wyoming today are state dollars. They're not federal dollars. So that's been a part of it. This blow up recently, which included your county, Representative Wharf, they said it was done based on a citizen complaint, but we're not able to access that data to know what that's really all about. But it's been very strange, because we have numerous documents. In fact, one back in the late 80s that the Wyoming office of BLM sent to all their field offices explaining how the predator boards working with the state are authorized to do control work. And all of a sudden they've pulled out a regulation that's been in place since the 70s that they say requires that all work be done under the auspices of wildlife services. So there's some pressures being applied to them, it appears, and we may get that worked out, but I think we would be able to do it more easily if we had more of a structure in state government instead of the state just having a reporting function.
Okay. Committee, any further discussion? Yes. Oh, yeah. Sorry, Director. Yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready for Director Miyamoto to come on and
Mr. Chairman, here he comes.
okay. Hello, Bill. Welcome to the committee. I'm talking to somebody else. I'm sorry. We've got.
Thank you, Chairman.
Hi. Doug, are you on?
Oh, sorry, Mr. Chairman. I must have been transferring in when you were
Okay.
referencing me, so I apologize for that. Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm glad to hear predator management as a potential topic. It was the one that's been most pressing on my mind for the past several months. Mr. McGagnon is absolutely right. It's been a source of frustration for us here at WDA to get the news that law enforcement entities within BLM, Forest Service, and Fish and Wildlife Service sent these letters out to some of our contract pilots and some of our predator boards, informing them that they may be afoul of federal regulation by conducting activity that's gone on for several decades now. We know that we've had contract pilots that have been up and flying for many, many years. And our federal partners have always been supportive of that up until very recently. And I'm not sure what instigated that, but be that as may, it doesn't matter so much. We're having a legal review done right now. I can report to the committee that, we've dug into the federal regulations and laws fairly deeply and can find nothing so far that indicates a restriction of contract pilots, meaning those are not affiliated with USDA APHIS Wildlife Service. We can't find any restriction that says that a contract pilot that is working for a predator board can't conduct those activities as well. So that's part of the information that I would like to report to the board as we discuss this. I was approached by Representative Summers and Representative Nyman probably about a month ago now about this topic, asking if there were some things that we might be able to do to improve the predator program within WDA. And I told them, I think I have a few ideas that I would appreciate the opportunity to present as alternatives to your committee, because I think they would be improvements and fairly simple legislative fixes in mind already, but I would like to refine those a little bit more. I've been working with the Board of Ag on this and also with the governor's office and clearly Mr. McGagnon and Ms. Hendrickson, as we just discussed this ad nauseum. Yeah, there's been a lot of frustration this year about being able to utilize this program to its fullest extent, and I do have some ideas of where I think we could improve it if the committee would be willing to hear me out on that. So appreciate your time, Mr. Chairman. If anybody's got any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Committee? Thank you, Director. Do we have any other testimony on this? So any further discussion?
Can you hear them, Representative Fortner?
I could hear just a little bit of that. Mr. Chairman,
Oh, I'm not close enough to the mic. What we're discussing here is the possibility of a natural resource congressional tour. It's not exactly an interim topic, but we need to decide if we'd like to do that or not. Yes. Commissioner.
Ready, Mr. Chairman,
Yeah,
you ready?
Willox, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jim Willix, President of the Wyoming County Commissioners Association and a Converse County Commissioner. This topic overlaps a lot of committees, quite frankly, Mr. Chairman, and you're right. We submitted under Senator Boner's name originally, I'll be honest, because the pop-down menu online did not have the Federal Natural Resource Committee as an option. So we sent it to Ag under Senator Boner's name, and then I think we have duplicately submitted it under the Federal Natural Resource Committee. But what I wanted to share with you, and a few of you on this committee are familiar, in our part of the world, we've sponsored a tour last several years where we bring out congressional staffers, and it's basically a multiple use tour is how I explain it. We try to educate, particularly the party that is less inclined to support Wyoming's thoughts on multiple use, and bring them out and educate them. And there was a time we were on top of an oil rig, and from the top of that oil rig, I could see the Dave Johnson power plant. I could see Laramie Peak. I could see the North Platte River. I could see cattle. I could see sheep. I was on top of an oil rig. I could see the uranium mine. There was a buck antelope below us and cattle and sheep in the distance, and it's sagebrush land that's on public land. That defines multiple use in Wyoming. And so the idea that's being brought forward is, could we expand on that idea and use it as a state resource rather than kind of a Campbell Converse resource in that general area, and educate policymakers and really congressional staffers, because they're the ones that guide the information that get to congressional people. And we've had departmental people out as well, and show them the wild horse issue, show them atronomite, show them the forest. We don't have this fleshed out, but I think ag and minerals and tourism and the Federal Natural Resource Committee all have some vested interest in that. So, Mr. Chairman, what we're really looking for, I think, is support and maybe the opportunity to present it at an interim committee. I don't think there's a lot of legwork from this committee that would be necessary, but we would think if we can bring this coalition, and we're willing to kind of spearhead some of the ideas, but if it's state sponsored, and I use the term state loosely because I'm not sure where it would fall, it might be another way for us to hit a bunt single. We don't hit home runs with these tours, and Senator Wasserberger, you've been on it, Representative Clausen, we don't hit home runs. But let me give you one other example why this is so important. Several years ago, Bruce Jones was very active in this. And a congressional staffer came to Douglas and looked Bruce straight in the eye and said, "When did you wash your town?" And he goes, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, how come you're not covered with coal dust?" And that was an honest opinion of what a coal mining town in Wyoming might look like. So that's part of this education process. So, Mr. Chairman, I would like that opportunity to consider pursue that, however it fits as an interim topic or not recognized, but it's probably something we work on between sessions. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd stand for any questions or thoughts. Thank you.
This tour would fit in with one of our interim meetings at some point in time, correct?
Mr. Chair, I don't want to commit to fleshing any of it out yet. I don't know if it would actually correspond with a meeting, because I think that's almost too many hoops to jump through. These are pretty hard to get coordinated. It's more about support and philosophically, if it's something we want to do. Again, we bring it forward conceptually more than specifically, but we know it's been successful. It makes a difference.
Representative Worf.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm excited to hear this. This is a concept we've tossed around before in a prior life, but one of the things I would ask you to consider is, or have you thought about taking these people in the wilderness area and letting them experience our grizzly bears? And I say that in all honesty, because it is a problem. And I think they need to understand what we deal with on a daily basis. The people that live in close proximity to these animals live with that every day. And I think it really would be beneficial. You know, we don't need to feed the bears, but let's just experience the bears. Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I plead the fifth.
Mr. Chairman,
Vice Chairman
the real problem with
Wasserberger.
at least the times I've been involved with the Natural Resource Congressional Tour is logistics of the trip itself. And so if you pick them up in Casper, getting them to Gillette is 3 hours, you know, and so moving over to where the grizzly problem is a 6-hour drive from where we're at. So it's really difficult to get them to see all the things that you'd like them to see in Wyoming. And so you gotta pick and choose what's the best thing for them to see and experience. And so that's the most difficult part. And it's usually a 2.5, 3-day deal. I mean, so the time is tough just to get everything in.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may expand on that, whether this is and NUI is the organization in our part of the world that started this, but whether we expand on that concept or create a whole new one, I don't know if we have any of that fleshed out, because anything we do to educate, I think, is valuable, and maybe it becomes a Western Wyoming one. The issues on the Western side are different than the multiple use in our part of the world, as demonstrated in some of your previous testimony. So again, I don't, you're right, it's not specifically an interim topic, but we might like to keep that on your radar as well as some other committees, but it may actually fit better under Senator Boner's chairmanship of the Federal Natural Resource Committee than just ag or just minerals or just tourism.
Yeah. All of the committees will be limited by management council on how much they can meet. So that's one of the considerations that we would have. Representative Fortner.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. I guess my big concern would be, what would the cost be to the taxpayers to set up these kind of tours? Has the Wyoming County Commissioner Association did a study on that, or have any kind of idea what we're looking at as far as additional cost? Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Fortner, I don't have those specifics in front of me. I think, I don't want to guess at what the number is for the NUI one. And there are some federal congressional rules you have to follow about number of people that have to show up. So it is, I'll be honest, it's not fleshed out, but I think conceptually, and it depends on who is sponsoring, how we've generally used the counties and the cities and have been the spine, the companies that we show them have helped us with the tours. There are some weird federal rules you have to follow, and I don't know if that changes if it becomes a state sponsored event. As far as number of people you have to have when you're visiting with them, that just some odd stuff. But again, Mr. Chairman, a lot of details there, but I don't have that number, Representative Fortner. I apologize. I guess I'm looking at there, but you're actually seeing me there.
I think that could be fleshed out later on. Do you envision that this would be something done every year with one of the committees, Natural Resource Committee or the Ag Committee?
Mr. Chairman, that's the current model. Again, it depends maybe on logistics, depends on if successful. We canceled last year's because we couldn't do it in this environment. I think it has the potential to be a valuable annual event or a biannual event. Again, we're just kind of bringing it forward to see if there is broader buy-in. We're going to continue to do it in our part of the world. Individually, Campbell and Converse and Johnson and others have participated. They've gone over to Devil's Tower, they've gone to Mr. Nyman's logging, the lumber mill over there, and they've been at Devil's Tower. And, so we're trying to just show them that, but we really haven't done it on the western side. And I'm not saying that's the only place to do it, but the western side of the state has not been showcased for its multiple use.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted
Heather.
to suggest that the committee doesn't have on its list because it is more of a catch-all committee, but if the committee were to choose to have some sort of a topic that were reports from agencies and state and local entities, this could very well fit within that as far as a broader topic.
All right. Thank you, sir. Representative Winter.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to congratulate you for your things you're doing with these tours. And I want to follow on Representative Worth's coattails a little bit here. This whole deal of going into the wilderness I think is really an important thing. Very few people understand, especially the federal delegations, about what goes on in that wilderness area. Not only are there lots of grizzly bears and wolves, but the wildfire situation is just horrendous in there. And I would propose that we think really hard about this before the wilderness areas were ever, before that bill ever came up. There was a tour by a lot of folks, congressional folks and others that did tour the wilderness area, went into from up in the Beartooth into Montana and come out into the park. And that's been 60 years ago or so, because that was my first paying trip as a guide or a horse wrangler. And so there's a lot of interest there, but we have to make the opportunity available to folks. And you just can't imagine the change in your opinion of things once you get in there. The timber is falling in on everything. The bears and the grizzly bears are just beyond control. And so we have to educate folks, and with what they're doing out in the roundabout country in Wyoming is great, but I think we need to make an effort to get folks into the wilderness area, and bringing the federal delegations in there, I think is really, really important, or at least their representatives. So I would strongly encourage that we think about this very strongly, because it's getting to be a disaster in there, and we need people to be aware of it. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative Winter. So is the committee okay with considering this? We'll hear more from the county commissioners. It might not be a formal topic, but it sounds like it would be a good plan moving forward. Okay.
Thank you,
So
Mr. Chairman.
We'll add that however we need to. Thank you, Commissioner. Moving on. So we have Representative Western. We've already worked with the predator management. We work both of them together. Representative Wharf, would you like to share with the committee your ideas and tie it into, I'm on the next page, it's all kind of tied together. Go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Yeah, I brought up a bill this year that was basically a repeat of a bill that we had drafted in 2015 that we had worked on, but it dealt with the transfer of federal lands. And I just think that we really need to seriously look at this topic. A lot of people keep telling me that we can't do it, but I know it's been done before. And I just think, we sat here and struggle. I mean, we just gone through a session making cuts, trying to figure out what we're going to do with our budget. We're being hammered by an administration. This is the second time in my brief history in this state where I've seen the presidential administration basically attacking what I believe is the backbone and the heartbeat of our country or our state, and that is our economic driver, primarily the oil and gas and the coal industry. And I do think it begs the question, if they're going to continue to attack our economy, we need to figure out a way to fund our state and local governments, and that's always been done by having the ability to develop your own resources. And I do think that's one of the things that's been lost. A lot of people don't realize that it was up until 1976 that federal lands were supposed to be disposed of. And they changed that. That's when we created the PILT program, where we get payment in lieu of taxes rather than having those properties actually disposed of and turned over to the states. And I know this is a topic that if you got some of the hate mail I got, you know what I'm talking about. But I do believe that the state of Wyoming is sovereign. And if you don't believe that, then you're probably not going to agree with this concept. But I've always said, I believe three things. You need to ask the question if you think we're sovereign. If you believe the state is sovereign, then The next question I ask everybody is, do you think we need to follow the Constitution of the United States? And it's very clear that the federal government can't own and retain land except for very specific purposes. And then the last question I ask is if you believe the compact that allowed us to come in as a 44th state of the union is a contract that the United States should be held to and that they should honor. To me, those three questions, if you agree with that, we need to be saying that the federal government needs to honor that compact and start disposing of those lands and allow us to come into the union on the full equal footing doctrine and be treated just like all the other states. I think right now, the Western states that have so much retention of federal lands, it puts us at a distinct disadvantage to our fellow states. I look at, one reason we got 500,000 people in our state, a little over that, is just the fact that we can't develop our own lands. Half of our land is held by the federal government, and that puts us at a severe disadvantage. You think about, we got 3 people in Congress to represent our state, and that's all based on population. And I look at that, we are a remote state, but I think our state could have a lot more growth if we had the ability to develop more of our lands. And believe me, I am a sportsman's advocate. I love hunting more than just about anything. It's got me in a lot of trouble with a lot of jobs, but I think we can do both. I don't fear, there's been some fear that all we're going to do is sell that land, but I think we really need to look at this. The last time this happened was in the early 1900s. There was 5 states, Florida, Iowa, and Illinois. I can't remember the other 2. But they were able to get their federal lands transferred to their states. And people now point back to that and say, yeah, but where's all the public land? Public land is not in the Constitution. And I would much rather see us address this issue and look at it as far as what's in the best interest of the state. And so with that, Mr. Chairman, that's my pitch for the transfer of federal lands. And I want the committee to understand this is not a simple undertaking, but I think we're obligated. If you believe the state's truly sovereign, we need to stand up and tell the federal government that we want to be treated like all the other states in the union. Thank you.
Okay, so the committee knows we have a little bit of history with trying this before, and I'm not sure where it got derailed, but I would be willing to help Representative Wharf in trying to research this at least. And I think if the committee looked into it, I think it's a long shot. The federal government does what it pleases, and but I think we should be looking at it and maybe getting a little bit of pressure toward Washington, D.C. on our natural resources at least.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
So I would be in favor of looking at that topic. But the real issue is, and we just talked about the congressional tour here. When you have national societies that people join and they pay dues to, and the primary purpose of that organization is to defend federal lands, it makes it really difficult for a US senator in, say, New York State to vote to give away federal land. And that's happening in every state, not just ours. And so that makes the issue a very, very difficult one. But I think it's a great idea. I don't mind looking at it. I think it's actually a very fascinating topic, as having had the opportunity to teach American history for 16 years. It's kind of fun to look back through it and see how it works. But
I would think we might have a better chance with the courts than we will with Congress. And if this were to become a legal issue and it got into the court system, possibly we could drive it. It'd be worth looking into, I think. Is a committee Would the committee like to do this? Looks like. well,
Mr. Chairman,
looks
there are some
like
more
we're
people who
mixed.
want to speak on.
Oh, we've
this.
got,
There's the person up.
Oh.
And there's also Marty Halverson who has her hand raised.
okay, Marty, I can't see you, but I can
She
see
needs to be
Bill
admitted.
Fortner.
I think.
Go ahead, Representative. Marty, we're bringing you in now and I'll call on you in a little bit.
Well, Mr. Chairman, here she comes.
Okay,
Thank
Go
you,
ahead.
Mr. Chairman.
go ahead, Bill.
I think everybody in the state of Wyoming that's believers in Wyoming would like to have all the federal land gave back to them or take it back. But there's some discrepancies that I want to touch on in the fossil fuel industry, which I've worked in most all of my life since I was 15, running push dozer for construction outfit, doing creek conversions for the coal mines. A lot of these companies that was viable then aren't viable now, and it's not because of the federal government. But a lot of it is because of world government, world markets. The coal industry is basically they're under siege by the lending agencies, BlackRock and others that refuse to lend their operating loans anymore. It goes a lot deeper than just federal oversight. I think the public really needs to be educated on all factors of what it takes to on federal land to get that back. We'd have to have massive cuts in education and our bloated government in the state of Wyoming to even start down that road. We look at forest fires and things like that. That's a huge cost. And we're already running in a deficit. I don't see any way that we could manage the ability to even finance that kind of stuff. Don't get me wrong. I'd love to have every acre of that back, but right now financially, Wyoming, I don't see where they're in a situation where they could actually do what they need to do and be viably financially set to do that. I think they're upside down right now as far as their budget goes. If they took on the federal land, I think they'd be really upside down. I think that'd be a massive undertaking.
Would you be willing to go into an education process with the ag committee, at least start there and look into this for education purposes to start with and see if there's anything that could be done?
I sure would be, because as far as fossil fuels goes right now, we're on a downward swing, and and Biden, he just dedicated, I think, $2.4 trillion that come out in the news yesterday. So I'd be up for that. Yeah.
All right. The senators have to gavel in about a half hour, so we need to be as quick as we can. Marty, welcome to the committee. I haven't seen you for a while. How are you?
I am well, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much. I really urge the joint committee to take this up over the interim, just if only for education purposes. The legislature needs a full and complete education on this subject. There's been such a large turnover in the legislature since this bill was last brought in 2015. Where it did pass the House 38-22, and then very indignantly got referred in the Senate to the Journal Committee. And Senator Wasserberger, I think if I'm not mistaken, you and Senator Escabel were the Journal Committee in 2015.
Nice job, Senator. Okay,
Well,
be careful,
You know, I
careful,
just-
Marty.
I was the chairman of the Journal Committee, and the president of the Senate at that time parked all kinds of bills in the Journal Committee, but the Journal Committee does not meet.
And you might
Got a
recall,
lot of heat.
I lobbied you and Senator Escabel quite heartily back then. It was all in good fun, but underneath it all, we saw that as not a nice acknowledgement of our efforts. Two questions that have come up. Representative Fortner, Wyoming can afford it. There is a great article written by a energy economist out of University of Wyoming, Tim Considine, who wrote an article called Opportunity Lost, ? And says Wyoming can afford it. No one's talking about poking holes in Yellowstone, but if we had control over the 48% of the surface land and the 62% of the subsurface, Wyoming can afford it just fine. There is a lawsuit ready to go. It is fully funded by one of the Western states. And I think if they saw Wyoming taking on this subject over the interim, they would be encouraged to bring this lawsuit forward. Please, for the purposes of educating the committee and the legislature and Wyomingites on this subject, Representative Wharf and I, Mr. Chairman, we have had hate mail from the green decoy groups, such wealth going into those groups that do nothing but push back against any transfer ideas. And it would be my pleasure to join you at every one of your interim meetings and do my best to provide you with all the information that we have accumulated since 1976, when FLIPMA was passed. And the federal government just announced no more disposing of land. We're violating our contract with you states. And there's been a lot of research done, constitutional research done on this subject. And darn it, Wyoming has a case. And so does Montana and Utah and Nevada, and New Mexico and Arizona. Anyway, I will wrap this up. Please, I encourage your committee to take this up. And thank you very much for your time this morning, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mrs. Halverson. Representative Halverson, yeah. Marty served in the House for a few terms. So I think that this would be one of the hardest sells we'd have with the management council, but I'd be willing to do my best to bring it forward if the committee would like to do it. I realize there's always a storm of emails, but most of those emails that I got were from out of state. So Senator French.
Yeah, I would encourage the committee to pursue this. We need to get an answer, you know. And as far, you know, if those lands went to the state, the feds right now are getting at least 50% on the federal mineral royalties. That's a big chunk of money that could go towards administering those lands. So,
and the sad
I
part
encourage
is,
the committee to.
they don't even need to give us, they don't have to give us 50% of anything. They can take it all if they want, and they can stop all production. Yeah. Huh?
Literally, I said it's still
Yeah.
in the statute, literally.
So
Any win.
what is a committee in favor of this? I would be willing to do a little educating before I went before the management council, if the committee would like to approach. Okay. Had a few shaking heads, but I know how that is. It looks like we'll proceed with it. You okay? All right. We'll put that on our list. Do we have one more topic then? Representative Winter's topic here. Oh, you know what? There's two of them. There's Jim Hicks had one, or not Jim Hicks, Larry Hicks had one. We did this. Didn't we do this in select water, Dan? Representative Larson?
I kind of thought it was a little different, but there was
Okay.
one similar. Yes. Because he didn't mention it as a bill that he brought.
Mr. Chairman, It
Yes,
appears
Kayla.
that Senate File 135 from this year might be relevant to that topic.
It was this year then.
Yes.
Did it die in the Senate? Well, I don't, okay. Yeah, see where it
Mr.
is at.
Chairman, the Senate did not consider it for committee of the whole.
Okay. Well, then it wasn't our fault. Would, yeah, would the committee like to, would you like to consider this bill during the interim? I don't think it'd take long because we've worked on it in select water and it has some merit. It just, okay, we'll add that. Now, is there just one more, Heather?
Mr. Chairman, I believe there are two more. There's the Wyoming
Oh,
Agricultural
yes.
Authority that you
Forgot the big one.
presented, and there's wildfires that Representative Winter
Okay,
presented, unless there are additional ones from anyone who's just come to bring them.
Representative Winter, would you present wildfires?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This topic I've been thinking about for a long time, but it's something that I think we need to address. As we all know, the whole country is burning up from California to east, and I think we need to get the attention of our federal government to change their management techniques. And that's the problem with most of these topics that we bring up in this committee. The federal government is involved in all of them. And so we have to figure out some way to get some reaction from them in a way that will do us some good. I've introduced this, or I'm planning to introduce this topic to the Natural Resource Committee, of which I'm a part of now. And but I thought it was important to bring it to this committee as well. We just need to do something to protect our rangelands and our timberlands, both for grazing and for timber production. Our financial situation in this state has really come to bear, and a lot of it is due to this problem. Many of the small timber management or timber harvesting outfits that were like in Du Bois, and I shouldn't say names, I guess, but in
No,
the,
you can in committee. Go
okay,
ahead.
in Du Bois and other places, I think in the Black Hills, they've pretty much gotten rid of those timber harvesters over there, and it's mostly because of fire. And that resource just goes to waste, and there doesn't seem to be any interest in trying to remedy the problem. And the problem is the management by our federal agencies, I really believe. So I would hope that we could somehow, either in this committee or in the Natural Resource Committee, we could consider that as an interim topic. Thank you.
Any discussion, committee? Okay, all right. All right, I would agree too. When I graduated high school, the lumber industry was the third largest industry in Wyoming, and it's hardly on the radar anymore. The only place it is to speak of. They're letting us log a little bit of beetle kill, but I'm concerned when that's gone, whether they'll allow any more forest leases. But wherever there's private forest, there are lumber yards and they're thriving, and the forests are healthy. We don't have to deal with the pine beetle infestations or the forest fires. So I think one way or another, either your Natural Resource Committee or this one ought to take it up. Yeah. Okay. So is the committee good with this one as well?
Mr. Chairman, we do have one more person that would like to speak.
Okay,
We'd like to let him in, Mr. Moline.
go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, here he comes.
Hi. Mr. Moline, how are you?
Doing great, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Actually, the comments I want to make are on a separate topic.
Okay, well, just stay, is it on the Ag Authority? That's the last. one
No,
you
it's
had.
a topic that's not on the list. It's
Oh.
one I discussed with you yesterday.
Okay, yes, go ahead.
Do you want me to wait until you're done with the
Nope.
wildfire topic?
Well, I think we're okay with wildfire. We're gonna bring it on then, as a topic, or else try to get it to natural resources. Go ahead while you're on.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of the topics, it's a policy question probably for the Ag Committee and the legislature, but some of my members are questioning about the level of sales that are needed to be classified for agriculture for land valuation purposes. Currently, that's at $500 if you're using your own land, and $1,000 if you're the person you're leasing the land to. And as a question, does the committee want to take a look at perhaps adjusting that amount of sales that you have to have?
Does the committee understand this? Representative Larson.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. This is brought up in the Revenue Committee in the past. We have discussed it. It's kind of a hot topic, but I would be interested in bringing it. And it has to deal with when ag land is defined with the assessor, if it's ag land or not. And it's something to bring up, I think. I don't know if Mr. Moline has more comments or not.
Mr. Chairman, actually, when we looked at this before, my policy is that it should be $10,000, realizing that that's above a limit that other organizations would support, but I think we need to take a look at it. $500 seems terribly low. But it's a question, it's a policy question for the legislature if they want to take a look at it. I would encourage you to take a look at it about maybe adjusting those levels. I believe that was put on, I believe, in the 1980s. And I don't believe those values have been changed since. So encourage the committee to take a look at it to see if those values should be adjusted.
Representative Larson.
I think, Mr. Chairman, I think a lot of it has to do with, when you get new landowners, they come in and they can get their ag land assessed at a lower value. And is that really protecting those that are truly ag oriented in the industry?
Okay. Representative Winter.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. With regard to this topic, we killed that bill last year, as I remember, and the main reason that I can remember about it was that ag land, I don't think is defined properly, or at least there's a lot of questions as to what it constitutes ag land. So I think that's one of the things it might be, we could bring it up and discuss it in this type of a committee. But talking about raising taxes and so forth, I think we better make sure we know what we're talking about before we get too involved. So that's my comment.
Yeah, changing this would just change the valuation of the land and what the property tax on it would be. But this would be probably the best committee for that to go to, I think, rather than revenue. We understand. Would the committee like to review that then as a topic? That'll be fun. Bring the idea of a tax raise to the floor. That's always a good deal. Okay, so we'll add that. Representative Larson. I'm
Mr.
sorry.
Chairman, I might be jumping a little bit too quick, but I was wondering if we couldn't rank those and send an email to each of the chairmen and
Yeah,
And so you'd have a better idea what the committee would
I think
most
that'd be,
like.
I
Lead
think that'd
one.
be good. Make sure that we don't overload. I think we could probably get all of these done that we've had thus far. Maybe not. Yeah. So does the committee, would the committee be okay? We've still got one more topic, but be okay with ranking it, sending an email to probably Brian or I, both Brian and I and LSO would.
And Mr. Chairman, we will need to send in those priority letters to Management Council by next Thursday. So it might be good
Okay.
to set a date, maybe even as early as Monday or Tuesday, to have everyone's ranked choices into you and Chairman Boner.
Okay, everybody would think about that over the weekend or do it if you're ready. Yeah, Representative Larson.
Mr. Chairman, before we leave, can we make sure we have the topics that everybody knows what they are?
Okay. And the last one's Ag Authority, and we reviewed that in the bill. It passed committee of the whole yesterday in the House. Has to go through a couple more readings. And there seemed to be whether it passes or not, I'd like to go ahead and continue the discussion in an interim idea. Yeah. Vice Chairman Clausen, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I think we should circle back on the whole, do this issue, but circle back on the processing issue, maybe just for a short period of time, just as much work as we did. It was urgent last year when there wasn't product in the store, but I think if we circled back, including this topic, but either whether this passes or not, I think it's a good subject to at least circle back on and make sure we're on top of.
Maybe would a report from Business Council and as well as Department of Ag work? Okay. All right. Would the committee be okay with studying this idea of an ag authority in the interim then? Okay, we'll go ahead and add that.
Mr. Chairman, did you want a recap of sort of the
Yeah. Go ahead
broad-ish
and
topics
recap
so that
them
people can?
and be ready to maybe send out that recap.
Oh, sure. We can send it out rather
Yeah.
than
Would that be
stating it.
good with the
Sure.
committee and then you'll have it on an email? Oh, I'm sorry. Sheriff, come on up. Yeah, Mr. Odekoven.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Byron Odekoven, the Executive Director for the Wyoming Sheriffs and Chiefs, rising in support of one of your topics, and that is the issue of trespassing. That's been a near and dear topic for law enforcement for a number of years. An old friend to the legislature, but maybe not to the new members of the committee, as we've wrestled with simple trespass versus criminal trespass versus trespassing across my property to do something on the neighbor, if you will, which I didn't grant permission for in the first place. So there's a host of issues under the topic of trespassing that law enforcement would like to be present at the table and provide you some background understanding, point out some of the conflicts and the issues with the statutes. I would also respectfully request that you reach out to the county attorneys as they attempt to prosecute some of these cases or split the hair between simple criminal and other, if you will. Your other bill didn't seem to fare well in court here lately, and we may want to look at how that, why that happened, what the verbiage was that was in conflict, and figure out how to deal with that trespassing for other reasons, if you will. So law enforcement stands ready to assist you on that topic, would like to have that discussion. It's very frustrating for us as we deal with landowners and we tell them, no, we have to warn these people first, even though they're clearly here, clearly knew they weren't supposed to be here, clearly doing something. But the indication in the statute is everybody gets a free pass first, and then we might do something later, regardless of whether or not they're up to no good or not. So not sure that's the balance that we should have in Wyoming. It seemed to work well in days gone by, but with new people seeming to be up to new and different things, not sure that quite fits the model that we should do now. And it's difficult to deal with some of those people when they're up to that level of no good, Mr. Chairman. So please, between law enforcement, and would ask that you involve the county attorneys so you can hear some of the prosecution issues that go in on this and how that interrelates would be most beneficial. So rising in support of your topic of trespassing, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
That would, yes, Cyrus, or Representative Western, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's no secret that the good sheriff and I don't always see eye to eye on certain issues, but I think this is actually a really good one. I do. I think in regards, whether it be again, criminal trespassing or otherwise, we all know that I'm an avid hunter and I'm a big public access guy, but also I'm a strong believer in property rights. And there's just an issue in hunting in Wyoming. And there's reality is there's some hunters who know that there is not a clear delineation of enforcement, especially when it comes to hunting trespass. And so what happens is hunter goes on someone's land, the landowner comes out and says, hey, you don't have permission to be here. You know, they call the game warden. The game warden says, well, this actually, I think this is in the sheriff's realm. So they call the sheriff and the sheriff says, well, if they're a hunter, clearly this is the authority of the game warden. So I think really as a component of this issue, I think that's a really important one to discuss and give clear delineation, because I think if a hunter is on private land and they don't have permission to be there, they ought to be cited by the game warden for trespass. And that's something I think getting that delineation more clear for law enforcement, I think would be beneficial, and at least clearing up this component of the trespass discussion.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Thank you for that. And there is a distinction. Wyoming created that separate distinction for the burden of proof as hunting trespass versus all other trespass, created and separated that a little bit. And maybe it would be good for the committee to understand that, how that interplays in the actual investigation and a determination for citation and then on to prosecution. And, excuse me, in the overall issue of trespassing, I think it would be important to understand that distinction. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we've gotten into trouble before trying to pass trespass laws.
Yes, sir. Happy to help, though. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. So have we covered everything? Oh, do we have more public testimony? I am sorry. I get focused either on the screen or committee, so it looks like we're good. All right. So what Senator Boner and I will probably work with LSO to consolidate as much as this and condense it as much and concisely as we can. And we'll send that to the committee as soon as it's ready, and we'll wait to hear back from you with rankings. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Meeting adjourned.